Hey guys, welcome to the breakdown. I know it's been a very, very long time. I think it has to be more than 4 months. But anyways, I'm Els.
I'm William.
Yeah, and this is actually our first episode where we are not in the same room together. We are both at our own homes, of course, social distancing
Uh-huh.
because of coronavirus. We've got a new podcast set up here. William is actually calling in. So that'll
Yeah.
be how we're doing this going forward. It should work pretty well, I think, and we'll actually be able to make more episodes than I think we would have before. So that should be good. But
Right.
today we're just gonna start talking about college basketball. I know the tournament got canceled. I was really looking forward to watching that. But we're just gonna start off with some major departures as it comes to the draft. William, what is one prospect who you are really intrigued to see go to the draft?
So this isn't a college prospect or a guy who played. He did not play in the NCAA last year. Famously chose the overseas route, and that would be LaMelo Ball. I don't think there's been a high school basketball player who's gotten so much attention for what he's done on the court and off the court with his dad. And I think that we've really seen him develop. And in New Zealand, he was balling out with the Breakers. He's a guy who's probably going to be a top five, top three pick. And I think he'll be the first point guard off the board. Because Anthony Edwards is probably going to be first. He's a shooting guard. So I think LaMelo Ball, with his skill set, he's a guy he's 6'8", 6'9", correct me if I'm wrong, maybe 6'7", but, he can dunk, he can assist, he can shoot. So I think he's got the whole package.
Yeah, we really have seen LaMelo take off in terms of his development in the last year or two. I remember just a few years ago when LeVar said that LaMelo would be the best in the NBA, a lot of people laughed at him and said, no, it's definitely Lonzo. But I think now people are seeing that LaMelo really could be the best of his brothers and an NBA All-Star, and I'm really, really excited to see what he can do in the NBA. I think he's definitely in that number one pick conversation. I think if the Warriors get the number one pick, they're going to go with Edwards. So I think
Mm-hmm.
if you're a Ball fan and you want him to go number one, you're rooting against the Warriors to get that number one pick. But I think there are definitely some other teams that are looking for a point guard that would take him at number one really anywhere. He'll definitely go in the top three, but it'll be interesting to see where he goes. My intriguing player is actually Tyrese Halliburton, the sophomore from Iowa State. I think he will be one of the top point guards in this draft class. He has amazing vision on the court. His three-point shot was pretty efficient this year, went 41.9% from three, but he's got a hitch in his shot, so it looks a little awkward. But I think he could be a pretty good pro. He's projected to go top 10 right now in that lottery, and he could do some pretty big things. He kind of reminds me of Alonzo Ball, Michael Carter Williams. He's tall like
Yeah.
LaMelo. I think they're pretty similar players, but I just think LaMelo is a lot more creative and does a lot more offensively.
Yeah, it's unfortunate not being able to see LaMelo play against, some of the top competition in the NCAA. And I think that people, I don't think we even have to worry about that, though, at this point, with what we've seen just dominating at a professional level. Him and RJ Hampton over there doing pretty well. So I think that there's nothing to really worry about LaMelo. I think that his not being in the NCAA obviously hurt because it just would have been really fun to see him at that level. But I also think that Halliburton is an intriguing prospect and a guy who's averaging 6.5 assists per game, which is a pretty healthy number. And Iowa State was not very good this year, so they didn't make national headlines. But he's a guy who's kind of flown under the radar and has always been in that top 10 conversation, I feel like.
Yeah, and he's another person who's really taken off in the last year, averaged more assists than Trey Jones this year, and Trey Jones is known as one of the best passers in the NCAA. So I think that's just an interesting stat. One other thing I think is interesting if you look at this draft class is at the beginning of the year, James Wiseman was the person who everyone thought was going to go number one at the end of the year, and now he's slid out of the top five almost. Only was able to play 3 games in Memphis, of course, because of the suspension from the NCAA. William, what are your thoughts on Wiseman?
Yeah, I also unfortunate that we did not get to see Wiseman. I think he did pretty well in his first 3 games, and then he got slapped with the suspension from the NCAA, and then he just called it off to go to the NBA draft. I still think that obviously I think he's the best. Actually, it is a conversation now with Okongwu, but I think that Wiseman is still the best center prospect. I mean, they call him the unicorn. He's 6'11", 7-foot guy. He's really smooth and he's good with the ball. And I think that a bunch of teams are going to want to target him at probably 2 or 3. Honestly, he has so much potential, and even though we didn't see him finish out his season at Memphis, you got to look at his upside, and I think that he could be an all-star in the NBA just with his unique set and his ability to score and also feed off of other people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think if he had been able to play the whole season with Memphis, he'd still be in that number one conversation. And I also think Memphis would have been able to stay in the top 25 if Wiseman had been able to play the whole season. But let's move on from our draft discussion and just get into some previews of next season. Of course, we can start with a few ACC teams. The ACC will look a little different next year. I think UVA will be right up there back at the top of the conference. They're looking pretty strong next year, William. What are some of your thoughts about them?
Yeah, I'm expecting big things from Virginia next year. That's, mostly in part because Tony is bringing back he's bringing in an exceptional recruiting class, and this kind of reminds me of the DeAndre Hunter, Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome class with Jabri Abdur-Rahim, who's a proven small forward from New Jersey and a guy who averages, 30-plus points in his conference and did really well in the EYBL circuit. So with him coming in and then a top 50, I think he might be 55, Reese Beekman out of Louisiana. He's a guy who's he could end up sharing time with Kihei just because Kihei needs someone to spell him sometimes when he tries to do too much on the court. So having Beekman and then Abdur-Rahim who can score and then, he'll learn the pack line. Those guys are going to make a huge difference at UVA. And then also Carson McCorkle is also someone who could potentially be a lights-out shooter like Kyle Guy was. So I think that that's what UVA is going to benefit from the most, and then also having that transfer Sam Hauser from Marquette, a guy who played for Marquette for 3 years, I believe, and this is his last year of eligibility. He averaged 14 points at Marquette, when Marcus Howard was there, so that's pretty impressive that he was able to score that much with a guy who shot the ball so much. So I think that this team is going to be well-rounded. I think that they will be tested on defense. It won't be one of Tony's best defensive teams, but this is going to be a really potent offensive team.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues for UVA this past season was, of course, they struggled on offense quite a bit. But next year's team, they're going to have some potent scorers. You mentioned Abdur-Rahim. He is known as the best scorer in his high school class, really. And then Sam Hauser coming in, shot just under 50% from his career at Marquette. That he's a pretty good shooter at the 4 spot. So if he can step out and hit those threes next year, I think UVA's offense will be a lot better. Hopefully Casey Morcell's shot will improve from year one. In high school, he's a really good shooter, so I know he has it in him. We just need to see it hopefully next year, and I'm sure that will come out. And then, of course, Jay Huff will be a senior. He made some really big strides over the course of this past season. Was dropping double figures pretty regularly towards the end of the season. If he can continue that form into next year, that'll just be another great thing for UVA.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of depth on the UVA team, which they struggled with this year. And having a guy like, probably Wolverton Say and Beekman coming off the bench, guys who honestly would start most years, that's going to be huge. I mean, there's guys like Shedrick, who's coming off his redshirt year, to see what he's going to be able to do. And then Statman, who had a couple of good games this year. So, there are a lot of pieces for Tony Bennett, and I think that his starting 5 is going to be one of the best he's had talent-wise in Charlottesville. And I'm expecting really big things kind of back to the national championship year. Depends on how performance in March goes. But as for the regular season, I think that UVA is eyeing a ACC regular season victory, or at least going to be top 2, top 3 in the ACC.
Yeah, and so let's move in then to one of their biggest contenders next year, or at least who I think will be one of their biggest contenders, and that, of course, is Duke. Duke is going to take some losses from this past year. Trey Jones already announced he's going to the draft. He's the only one so far, but of course, Vernon Carey most likely will. Cassius Stanley probably will. Those will probably be the 3 draft departures at least. They lost Jack White and Javen DeLaurier to graduation. Alex O'Connell's transferring, although he didn't really play a big role in their team for the past few seasons. But boy, do they have a good recruiting class coming in.
Yeah, they do. it has flashbacks to the 2015 recruiting class with Tyus Jones and Jaleel Okafor and Justice Winslow, and those guys won a national championship. So Coach K has been able to win with freshmen. Obviously, this isn't RJ, Zion, and Trey though, and I think that there are going to be some flaws with this team, especially because they're not going to have much. It depends on if Hurt and Wendell Moore stay, honestly, and I think they both will. So it depends on how much leadership those guys bring. They're losing actually key glue guys like Delorier and Jack White and Justin Robinson, who actually played a lot down the stretch. But we've seen what Jeremy Roach has done at Paul VI. Wendell Moore actually played really well this season. And Matthew Hurt, I think, he didn't play as well as people thought that he would play, but with Mark there at center, take a little attention away from him, and I think that this Duke team's going to be pretty scary. Talent-wise, they're up there. They're probably top 3 in the country. But it depends on how they all put it together and how they have guys like Goldwire and Moore who can lead the team.
Yeah, I think if Matthew Hurt's shot struggles like it did at times this past season, they might struggle to find a bucket at times next year. But if Matthew Hurt is on fire like I think he can be and definitely has shown that he can be, I think they'll be a pretty formidable team. Jalen Johnson, the physical small forward, he's going to be good next year. Wendell Moore, you already mentioned. Mark Williams, our close friend, coming in at center. He's definitely a presence in the post, and it'll be really exciting to see what he can do, definitely, when we watched him in high school. And then They also have some good guys coming off the bench. Henry Coleman from just up the road in Richmond. He can shoot it from all over the court. He's also a physical small forward, power forward. DJ Stewart, who's actually a 5-star, who right now we have coming off the bench, but of course you never know what Coach K will go with it when it comes to his lineup, so he could definitely be a starter and would probably start on almost any other team in the country.
Yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches, and it reminds me a lot of the Kentucky team that's going to go out on the floor this year. Guys who have been 5-stars. Johnny Juzang is probably not going to start again on Kentucky, so they've got Henry Coleman, Brakefield, Stewart, and Goldwire, who's played a lot in past years, who are going to be on the bench. So they also are going to have a lot of depth, but a lot of freshmen on that lineup.
Yeah,
and then it'll be interesting to see how Patrick Tape does as the transfer from Columbia.
Yeah, I was just actually about to mention Patrick Tape. They just landed him, I think, 2 or 3 days ago from Columbia, as you mentioned, bringing some experience, some NCAA experience to this young Duke team, and he most likely is going to back up Mark Williams. But yeah, that's basically Duke. They're going to be they should be a top 5 team if Coach K can put all the pieces together and turn them into a pretty effective team. Another team who I think is be pretty good next year is UNC. They had a big down year this past season. I really was not expecting that. I thought they were going to be top 3 in the ACC, as they always are. But of course, things don't always turn out that way.
Yeah, they're going to cause fits in their front court, and they have a ridiculously deep front court with 2 guys they're bringing in, 2 centers who are 5-stars, Daron Sharp and Walker Kessler. But they're not even going to start. It's going to be Garrison Brooks, who really proved himself this year, and then Armando Bakett, who chose not to go into the draft after an underwhelming season at UNC. And despite the fact that UNC is going to lose Cole Anthony, who did not do as much as he was expected to do coming in as such a highly touted freshman, they're still having a suitable replacement, Caleb Love. And then they're going to surround him with guys who've been there before, Leaky Black, Andrew Platek, and then Anthony Harris, who's got high potential after, I believe, tearing his ACL in the middle of the season. So I think that this UNC team is obviously going to have a resurgence here. I think that Roy is going to right the ship, and they could be, looking at a number 2, number 2, number 3 seed in the NCAA tournament with the amount of talent and depth they have, and especially with a top 10 recruiting class.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the beginning when you were just talking, their front court depth is insane. They have 6 centers on their roster alone, and 4 of those centers I'm pretty sure would start on any other team in the country.
Right.
And you've got to think they might lose those bottom 2 centers. Brandon Huffman, I think, might transfer just because he's going to be a senior this year, and I don't really see much playing time. He's going to be behind Brooks, Baycott, Kessler, and Sharp. That's just going to be hard to get into that lineup there, I think. And you can't forget to mention Puff Johnson, who's going to be a freshman small forward, the younger brother of Cameron Johnson, who just played for UNC just 2 years ago. So that'll be interesting for all those Tar Heel fans out there to see that heritage continue.
Yeah, and I think a lot of UNC fans have been expecting big things from Leaky Black, but have never really seen him take off. And I think that in his third year, I think that he's going to actually be a huge cog for this North Carolina team with a young front court potentially coming off the bench, and then Caleb Love at point guard. I think that Black is a guy who's going to need to step up.
Yeah, definitely. I think Caleb Love will be one of the best point guards in the country. Not many people are talking about him, but he's going to be pretty good. He's not going to try to score as much as Cole Anthony did this year or Kobe White the year before, but I think he's a better facilitator than both of those point guards, and I think he'll grow into a scoring role as the season goes on. But this is going to be a classic UNC team that likes to bang in the post, and they're going to be hard to beat if those centers get going.
Yeah, and I think that he's going to have plenty of options to feed the ball into, so it's not going to be a problem banging it down to Baycott and Garrison Brooks, who honestly is going to be first team All ACC, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of close to a shoo-in, honestly, with the season that he had this year.
Yeah, and so before we take a look at some more national teams outside of the ACC, let's just take a look at Louisville, who I think they're gonna have a down year next year. Jordan Nora has not declared for the draft yet, but he most likely will. And they're also losing quite a few players to graduation. Stephen Enoch, who's been pretty good for them. Dwayne Sutton, Ryan McMahon, who definitely has been really annoying to all UVA fans and a lot of other teams too. Lamar Kimball also graduated, and then Darius Perry, who would have started at point guard this coming season, is transferring out of the program. And their recruiting class is solid, but it's nothing really that you get worried about if you're an opposing team. And so this lineup from Louisville that they're going to have next year is not really a formidable one. They might go through some issues.
Yeah, and this is the year for Louisville to make a big run. And they started out really well, got to that number one spot, and then just kind of fizzled out. And, who knows what would have happened in the tournament, but this is their year, and they're graduating a ton of guys. And Wara was a guy for them who kind of carried in situations, and he was a Wood National Player of the Year candidate. So I don't expect much from this Louisville team. I think that David Johnson is their guy, and he was one of the best freshmen in the country. So him and Samuel Williamson and Malik Williams are going to be the go-to guys for them. But that's a huge drop off from what they had this year talent-wise. And graduating basically your starting lineup is going to hurt them a ton. Plus their JUCO transfer coming in, Jay Scrubb, might just go to the NBA draft.
Yeah,
so who knows?
Yeah, if Jay Scrubb does go to the draft, he's projected to be a starter next year, so that's going to be another big hit for Louisville. They only have one senior next year. That's Malik Williams. No junior. Actually, one junior would be Jay Scrubb, but if he goes, no junior. So that's a pretty young team. The Cardinals will be rolling out on the court.
And I think on the if we transition onto the national stage, I think the ACC is kind of going to take. It's going to be Duke. It should be Duke, UNC, Virginia, and then Florida State. We haven't talked much about Florida State, but this is a team that always flies under the radar, I think. And Leonard Hamilton always has these guys in the hunt. They're rangy, they're athletic. You can tell he recruits a certain type of player. They can always play both sides of the floor. And bringing in a guy like Scotty Barnes from Montverde is huge for them, and I feel like he fits the profile of the Seminoles so well. And even if they lose Patrick Williams and Vassell, I think they're still going to be a contender in the ACC with what they're bringing back.
Yeah, I think they'll be pretty good. But one team that I have to look at and think will be pretty good is Michigan. They're bringing in one of the top 5 recruiting classes, Isaiah Todd, Hunter Dickinson, Zeb Jackson. They might land Josh Christopher. He's actually 100% crystal ball to go to Michigan. And if he does that, they will be a pretty formidable team and should be top 10 if Isaiah Livers, Franz Wagner, and Eli Brooks also continue their good play from this past season.
Yeah, and once again, I think the Big Ten is going to be really deep and really competitive. and Michigan's bringing in one of its best recruiting classes it's had. And these guys, I mean, Isaiah Todd, he's a top 10 player. He's going to be huge for Juwan Howard, and then having a 7-foot center to replace John Teskey, and Hunter Dickinson coming out of Damascus is going to be big for them. And, they've got proven guys. Isaiah Livers is a great power, small power forward for them. And then Franz Wagner took off, the brother of Mo Wagner from that team that went to the Final Four. He played really well at shooting guard. So there's a lot going well for the Wolverines right now, and I think when they bring Christopher in, it'll be a little more interesting with regard to playing time. But they're going to have a bunch of guys to choose from, and I think that they will be 1 or 2 in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they're already reaping the benefits of hiring Juwan Howard. He's showing his recruiting ability from day one. I'm not sure many people thought he'd be able to land such a great class, but he's done it with his first ever class.
Yep.
So, William, is there another team you really want to talk about?
In the on that Big Ten note, I like Ohio State, and they burst onto the scene this year. They were at number 1 for a little bit. They're going to lose Andre Wesson and probably Caleb Wesson in the draft. But if Caleb Wesson stays, I think they're a top 5 preseason team for sure. C.J. Walker, Luther Muhammad, and then they just brought in Seth Towns, who's a transfer from Harvard, who was between Duke and Ohio State, but I don't really think he was going to Duke at all. So they got him. And if Wesson stays, he's one of the best centers in the Big Ten. They're going to be a team that's going to make a big run in the tournament, I think. And they've got a bunch of talented guys that they're bringing back. And even though they kind of faltered after getting that number 1 seed or that number 1 spot in the polls, they're going to be tough for teams like Michigan State and Michigan with them there.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Seth Towns playing again in college basketball. Sat out the last 2 seasons with an injury, but of course the last time he did play, he went off for 20-plus points against UNC in the tournament. So he's definitely someone that can play. Hopefully it doesn't take him too long to shake off the rust. And if he can get firing again, Ohio State's going to be a pretty good team.
Mm-hmm. A team I overlooked in the Big Ten. There are 2 teams that pop out to me who are not really losing. They're not slated to lose anyone, and that's Iowa and Wisconsin. And Iowa's bringing back, hopefully, I think that they will because he's not that high on draft boards, is Luka Garza, who was, in my eyes, the National Player of the Year, averaging close to 24 points in the best conference in college basketball. And Jordan Bohannon's coming back off of a medical redshirt, I believe. They've got Connor McCaffrey, Joe Weiskamp, Joe Toussaint. So, Fran McCaffrey's dealing with a lot of pieces at Iowa, and they were a great team this year, and obviously the Big Ten had its weird – something was off about the Big 12 and that teams could not win on the road, and they were only winning at home. But I think that Iowa might distance themselves from the pack a little bit, and I think that I have them in the top 10 for next season because they're not losing anyone, and they were a good team this year. So I think that they're a team that should not be slept on.
Yeah, and Garza's made major strides every single year he's been at Iowa, and I think he'll be coming back for his senior year, and who knows what he can do next year. I think he'll definitely be gunning for that Player of the Year, actually just getting snubbed this year. And Iowa could potentially win a national championship, and I don't know if many people saw that coming even before this year.
Yeah, and I think Garza, he'll be a great college player. I don't know how well his game is going to translate to the pros, but I think he wants, he's hungry. He wants to come back and win a national championship with a team that definitely does have the firepower to do so. And then also in the Big Ten, as I was talking about, I think Wisconsin can make a run. They always fly under the radar too. Greg Gard had this team rolling. They were tied for the regular season, or they were co-champions of the Big Ten for the regular season. Mm-hmm. They've got a guy people are mixed about, Brad Davison. He brings a lot of energy on the court. And then Nate Roivers, Demetric Trice, and they lost Kobe King to a midseason transfer, but they're bringing in a top 100 recruit, Ben Carlson. And they're only losing one player, Brevin Pritzel. So I expect big things from Wisconsin. They play that kind of UVA, slow, not many possessions, play good defense kind of thing. So they're not that flashy, but the results speak for themselves when it comes to Wisconsin and what they did this year.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But so that is all we have time for today. Hopefully, we will be able to keep making a new podcast episode each week. So we should be back next week. Not always going to talk about college basketball. We can talk about NFL draft, NFL anything, even some NBA if we want. But that's going to be it for this week. I'm Ellis Boone,
William Smith.
and this is